Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Governance and Risk call at 𝘰𝘳𝘬𝘳. This is number 214 of these weekly calls. My name's Patrick. I'm one of the governance facilitators covering for our usual host, Peyton, who's still enjoying a well-earned holiday. So today we're going to hopefully have a really interesting call. But first, we always go through the rules. So we expect everyone to feel welcome here. You know, we want to have a really good atmosphere, and we want everyone to enjoy this call, even when watching back on YouTube. So if we can avoid talking over each other, and obviously we welcome non-contributors at 𝘰𝘳𝘬𝘳, including myself. But if you feel free and you want to, please turn on your camera. You can use reactions to raise your hand if you want to interject or ask any questions, or you can post them in the chat, and either myself or David will ask them to the speaker. If you do speak, please introduce yourself, especially for people watching back or who are new to the DAO. They don't necessarily know who everyone is. But do feel free to ask questions and jump in, and we will hopefully have a really productive call. But as always, just try and be polite and don't be an asshole. So moving on to the agenda. So we'll start as usual with our governance roundup. I'll go over this week's votes, and I'll hand over to Gala for the MIPS update, and then over to Artem for the forum at a glance. This slide says there's no initiative updates, but we're actually going to have a quick update from Seb from Strategic Finance about the Gemini USD partnership before moving on to our discussion segment, where we've got members of the Crimson Cluster and the Viridian Cluster who are going to give an overview of their plans and also answer some questions on the call. So this week's votes, if we go to the next slide. So we had a proposal from the MOMC, which included changes to the MANA-A stability fee and maximum debt ceiling, as well as some new onboarding parameters for the compound E3M. This proposal passed. There's going to be a final launch poll for the compound E3M next week. So watch out for that one, and then it will be coming to an executive vote sometime soon. We had a poll for 1 month of extra funding for the off-boarded strategic happiness core unit, which was rejected. And we also had a poll looking to activate liquidations on the stablecoin vaults, which was passed. So now I'm going to ask the risk core unit to propose some liquidation parameters for the stablecoin vaults. And then once that's been done, we'll include that in a future executive as well. This week's executive still waiting to pass. So this executive it completes the technical changes to offboard the strategic happiness events and real world finance core units. It's cancelling their DAI streams and one MKR stream, as well as distributing the golden parachute payments. It also whitelists Oasis on the 𝑟ETH Oracle and distributes some SBF funding for the block tower legal and risk work necessary for their future onboarding. It's currently about 52k MKR supporting this. We needed about another 19k to pass. There's no office hours on this one, so it will execute over the weekend if necessary. Next week, we delayed the deployment of Teleport on Starknet by 1 week just to get some final reviews done by PE and Starknet, but that is good to go now and will be going up next week, as well as having delegate compensation distributions for October and the changes to the MANA debt ceiling and stability fees, which were passed this week. So I'm now going to hand over to Gala for our MIPS update.
Yes, hello, thanks, Patrick. So this is Gala for the MIPS update. We have many proposals in RFC. We will focus on the recent proposals. Most of them are eligible to enter the November cycle. So first we have 6 core unit budgets, namely DAX, Immunify Security, GovComs, SideStream Auction Services, TechOps, and SES. All of them will enter November governance cycle, which happens to be one of our budget submission windows. Next, for our top level MIPs, we have 7 in RFC. Most of them are eligible to enter November governance cycle. So we have MIP 80, which describes how MKR will be used as compensation. This one will remain in RFC until further notice from the author, in spite of being eligible to the November cycle. Next, both yield earning proposals from CoinShares and Origin Dollar, MIP 86 and MIP 87. The 2 proposals from Monetalis, MIP 88 and MIP 89. MIP 90 which is a liquid to AAA structured credit and money market fund. And MIP 91, describing a prospective contract against governance attacks. So all of them can enter the November governance cycle, except from MIP 90 and MIP 91, which are eligible to enter the January governance cycle at the earliest. Finally, we have a mandate modification and a facilitator onboarding for the 𝘰𝘰𝘱𝘳 security core unit. A proposal to modify the upper limit for the recently approved protocol-owned vault emulation, and a proposal to remove MIP 14, which defines a generic process for transferring DAI from the maker protocol to a target Ethereum address. So for our important dates, the formal submission window for November opens next Monday. So that's November the 7th, and it will close on Thursday, the 10th at 00 UTC. Is that right? Yes, I think so. And then new proposals must be posted by Wednesday, December the 7th. So remember, there's no cycle in December. So our next cycle is next year, January 2023. So every new proposal must be posted before December the 7th to be eligible to that cycle to January at the latest. So thank you very much. That's it for MIPS.
Thank you, Gala. And I guess just while we're looking at the important dates slide, I just want to note that many people are having clocks change at the moment. So it's already happened for me in Europe, and I think America's happening next week. So bear in mind that all maker meetings are timed in UTC. So it'll be an hour earlier than what you're used to going forward. But yeah, we can move on to the forum recap.
Welcome everyone to this week's forum recap covering the week of October 27th to November 3rd, yesterday. And shout out to Ashton for helping us to write these forum summaries. Now for news and announcements, there wasn't much, but we had a handful of technical updates this past week. Starting off with protocol engineering, informing us that the StarkNet fast withdrawal components, which were supposed to be in this week's November 2nd executive, have been delayed just in order to allow some time for final testing and checkups before it goes on-chain. Also non-related to that executive, withdrawals and deposits to the StarkNet DAI bridge were temporarily paused after the fee mechanism upgrade that happened on Sunday, October 30th. And also, TechOps made a scheduled maintenance last Friday on October 28 to rebuild the forum app, upgrade the forum to its latest version, apply security fixes, apply updates to the server, and if you're interested in live updates for scheduled maintenances, it's available on the MakerDAO status page. Now we're going to move on to some active discussions. Nothing really high level this week, but just some interesting discussions that are nice to see. And starting off, we know that HDUSD got a little wrecked. It now actually sits around 33 cents to the dollar after losing its peg, following 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝘰's announcement that they are delisting the stablecoin. And in response to what happened, recognized delegate 𝘧𝘪𝘯𝘬𝘳 shares some of his takeaways for the MakerDAO community. First up, he mentions that not all centralized stablecoins are the same. In the case of HUSD, there was poor transparency and communication. So while Paxos initially supported the stablecoin, it was later revealed that the US dollars backing HUSD were actually stored in the 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝘰 trust. Also, says that risky stablecoin management has its consequences. And as an example, talks of HUSD aggressively seeking market share by selling their coin at favorable rates, along with the legal situation happening with Celsius, may have spooked HUSD investors, leading them to redeem the tokens and resulting in HUSD severe under-collateralization. So in conclusion, 𝘬 believes that it's good to utilize our own stablecoin collateral. However, we need to be very careful as we manage these stablecoins, or else we may also face some liquidity trouble. And next up, we have drinks with delegates. And in this Halloween episode, 𝘱𝘪𝘯𝘕 dressed up as Big Red, the champion racehorse, 𝘪𝘯𝘃 from 3F Delegates as Ozzy Osbourne, and we had a special guest, Nadia, Growth Core Unit Facilitator, who was Scarlett Johansson. And they all had some drinks and dove into the growth aspects of Endgame, specifically talking about the adoption of the Endgame plan, how core unit team members should be thinking about clustering or becoming ecosystem actors, how institutions are struggling to achieve capital efficiency within DeFi, how MetaDAOs will scale faster than the current Maker core, and also how MKR token owners should be thinking about Endgame. Now, the video's up on YouTube. Check it out. 𝘪𝘯 posts a new video basically every week. And there are no signal requests as the ratification poll for Endgame's pre-launch MIP set has passed, and with it, the MIP 16 amendment sub-proposal to pull signal requests. And so just wanted to remind everybody that there's no more signal requests. That's it. But thanks for checking out the forum recap. And if you want some more information on announcements, updates, research reports, discussions going on in the forum, check out the written version, the forum at a glance, which is more comprehensive. And also the forum recap is now available on YouTube. So check it out, and thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks for putting that together, Artem. So we're just going to move on to our initiative update section. So we're going to have Seb from Strategic Finance, who's going to give us a very quick update on the GUSD partnership. I will admit I only asked him to do this about 10 minutes ago. So Seb, if you're on the call, feel free to take the mic.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, we just got the news that Gemini was approving the fact to pay the payment flow from the rewards. So you go through directly some smart contracts, which are just 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝘰 and 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝘰 input conduit 3. So it will go directly to MakerDAO without the need of a legal entity in between. So that's quite awesome. So we should get the first payment. So we missed the month of October because there wasn't 100 million GUSD on average in the PSM, but we are on track to get the first payment in December, which will be 1.25%, if I remember correctly, of the average amount. And that's it.
Thanks, Seb. Just a quick question for me. Is the 1.25% an annualized figure? So it wouldn't necessarily be...
Yeah, it's annualized, obviously. Yeah. Good point.
Any questions for Seb while we've got him here? Right, that's great. Thanks, Seb. Thanks for coming on to give us that quick update there. So we'll look forward to receiving some money into the surplus buffer in December from Gemini. So moving on again, we're going to go over to our discussion segment where we have invited members of the Crimson and the Viridian Cluster who are going to introduce their clusters to us and answer some questions. So David, if you could just go forward to the rules slide. So just a brief overview from the participants, and then we've got some pre-collected questions that we're going to ask them. Obviously, feel free to raise your hand, type it in chat if you want to get on the speakers list or you have a question you want us to ask. And we're going to, again, like we've done previously, we're going to try and do a maximum of 2 minutes for each question or point, just so if everyone that's got questions can get them answered. And then at the end, if we've got some time left, we can always go into things in a bit more detail. So I believe we're going to start with the Crimson cluster, and I think Sam is going to give us an overview, and then we'll move on to the questions.
Yeah, sure. Do I start, or David, are you going?
Just take it away,
It's
Sam.
all you, man. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can mostly do Q&A. I already went over the outline of the Crimson cluster in the the DVC calls a few weeks ago. But just a quick refresher. So the Crimson Cluster, we're looking to work with other projects in the crypto ecosystem and vertically integrate them under the Maker umbrella and support DAI as a first-class citizen. So our first project to integrate will be an advanced money market. This will give us access to new markets that Maker currently doesn't have access to, like rehypothecation of collateral. This will allow us to do things such as the popular delta neutral strategy on things like staked ETH. We also will support cross collateralization and no OSM delay, which will allow us to do better collateralization ratios. So these are all features that users indicate that they like in the ecosystem, and Maker currently doesn't support them. So under the Crimson Cluster, we'll add support for these. So yeah, let's open up to questions.
Yeah, so I think David's populated a slide for us with some of the questions from the delegates. So Sam, could you please walk us through some possible strategies for cash flow generation from Crimson Cluster and how it would be incorporated into the MetaDAO token?
Yeah, so the tokenomics of the MetaDAO token are defined by the endgame MIPs. Where the cash flows come from for the first project that we're integrating, the lending engine, it will come from things like interest rates. So much like how you use Maker, if you deposit some ETH into this MetaDAO's lending engine, you can borrow some DAI, and then there will be some stability fee attached to that. Furthermore, we will earn additional interest from people who are borrowing the collateral itself, something that's not currently possible in Maker. So say somebody wants to borrow ETH to lever up on staked ETH. This will allow them to do so, and then they pay some fees for that. And part of those fees go to the liquidity providers, and part of those will go to the MetaDAO, and through the tokenomics, ultimately to the token. Yeah, so those are the primary ways of earning fees to start, but we want to expand to other use cases in the future.
Okay, thank you. Do you plan on using the D3M for RWA platforms? And if yes, how would you manage the risks associated with that?
We are not currently focused on RWAs. We are focused on DeFi native stuff. It's not to say there could be an expansion to RWA stuff in the future, but we have no plans for that in this MetaDAO.
Okay. And will Crimson have on-chain governance? And if not, how will Maker Core know who to listen to in the event of a dispute?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is prescriptively defined by the endgame MIPS. So all MetaDAOs have their own governance, and the MetaDAO token is the governance token. So ours will be no different. We are we're filling the operator role to build things out, and we are not the owners of the MetaDAO.
That makes sense. Thank you, Sam. So one more question that's come in from the chat there from Do, one of our recognized delegates. What are some potential competitors for Crimson, and how is Crimson, this cluster, better than those, and other than the fact that cluster is kind of associated closely with MakerDAO?
Yeah, so there are a few lending engines in the market right now. You know, there's Aave, Compound, this new Euler Finance. So this is definitely not unique. What gives Crimson sort of a niche advantage is that one, we're going to be focused on large assets only. We are not interested in competing on sort of like tail end assets. So we're going to be Bitcoin, ETH, staked ETH. Additionally, all of these other lending markets use Chainlink oracles. We want to use Maker oracles because we're under Maker, but eventually want to support both Maker and Chainlink oracles, as well as maybe some other newer designs for oracles in a redundant design, such that we're optimizing for security. We think this is essential for large borrowers. They may not be interested in being exposed to some random asset in the market. So keeping it just to large scale assets, focus on security, we think this sets us apart.
Thanks, Sam. And I guess a question from me, given that no one else is asking any. I know you've been really involved in kind of development of Teleport. That's been one of your big focuses as a member of PE. Do you have plans for cross-chain as part of Crimson, or is that something that's going to be on the back burner and maybe a later development?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to go cross-chain. So the key pieces that are left for Maker Core, in my view, are getting multi-chain support for the accounting and the Vault engine, as well as the D3M is now in its final stages. So that's being finished up. With these components, we can plug into the MetaDAOs on any chain. And it's our view that what blockchain you're on is going to be a temporary detail right now. It's a technical detail and users don't care about this. So in a couple of years, it should be more like users define the action they want to do and not so much which chain they're doing. Obviously there's details that need to be worked out, like in the UI, say what chain you're on is important for security guarantees and stuff like that. But moving that less away from sort of the things you need to expose to the user in a mechanical way, and just sort of like, I want to take out a loan with this asset, maybe on this chain, and then I want the loan to go to this other chain, and it all just magically happens with the Crimson lending engine flowing through Maker Teleport, et cetera, and then you can just kind of do the reverse operation to repay your debt on other chains immediately.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any more questions for Sam before we move on? And we can always come back, hopefully, if Sam's going to stay on the call as well.
Yeah, can we circle back to the first question? So Sam, do you see in the future, if your cluster gets approved as a MetaDAO by MKR token owners, possibly using the tooling you have available with the Crimson cluster to perhaps have an ALM strategy where you have an ALM module that can generate income with some of the MetaDAO tokens? In other words, how are you planning as a MetaDAO? Because technically what you are is a sub-DAO of a DAO, right? For lack of a better word. And I'm just trying to figure out how your MetaDAO can possibly take advantage of a lot of the ALM strategies that are being put out there right now in the ecosystem. How are you thinking about that?
Is this with reference to the DAI that comes in as revenue into the junior capital surplus buffer for this MetaDAO?
Yeah, or any way that you can use the MetaDAO token itself of your cluster to generate some kind of ALM strategy. Have you thought about that at all, or is that something that maybe you're going to discuss in the near future?
No, honestly, I haven't thought too much about this yet, but it's something to consider. Like the end game is fairly extensive, so I'm still kind of going through it. So just coming up with the product has been our focus so far. And once we're confident with that, we can move on to, ALM stuff, managing treasuries, all that kind of stuff.
Got it. So I guess the first thing is bootstrapping, and then eventually kind of creating more value for the MetaDAO token when it's released into the wild. Okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Exactly. I mean, like you want to get product market fit first, and then worry about what you do with your success later.
Okay, we've got another question coming in the chat from Matt, who's one of our recognized delegates as part of Frontier Research LLC. So he's asking what are your thoughts on how to jumpstart the community of token holders for the Creator MetaDAO beyond farming? And is there a natural fit in terms of community contributors for this kind of MetaDAO, possibly people from other DAOs, particularly given the products that you're looking to launch?
Right. Yeah. So there's a number of components here. So some may farm the token just because they believe in the speculative future value of the MetaDAO token. some may be interested in joining the community and being more engaged. What we want to do, so with the initial release, we believe we'll have the best features with the best rates in the market to sort of bootstrap people who are using the platform. From there, we want to engage them with the UI and encourage them, you know, you're using the platform, maybe you'd be interested in joining the forum or joining the community, farming the token, whatever, sort of these get more involved type funnels. And another strategy we're using for the community is we want to invite other projects to join us and help build it. You know, we're going to be a small team, and we want to do these revenue share deals with other projects that have worked hard to produce the open source code that we'll be relying on. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to just make a big tent and invite everybody in and get people passionate about collaborating in this MetaDAO.
Thanks, Sam. And then there's another question coming from Tim, Feedback Loops delegate. Are you planning on having algorithmic rates?
Yeah, so for the, I'm assuming this is for the lending engine, for the collaterals of ETH, staked ETH, and Bitcoin derivatives, we will use similar to how other lending markets like Aave and Compound and Euler work, where you have a interest rate curve and based on the utilization of the pool, it will set the rates. There will be a difference for the DAI, and we will likely include the other stablecoins and the PSMs in these as well, where like Maker, you will be able to borrow at a preset amount up to the debt ceiling at a fixed rate. We think that's important for users. It gives you kind of the best of both worlds, where you get these advanced features, but people don't like taking leverage positions on these other platforms where they don't have guarantees of the rates, and sometimes they spike really high. It's a painful position. So we want to stick with the Maker model for stablecoin borrowing. And for the, say, the USDC market, we would just borrow DAI and then swap it for USDC under the hood.
Hey, Sam, kind of zooming out a little bit here. With regards to ecosystem actors, how does your cluster envision ecosystem actors helping out, right? Like, so I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of front ends that are going to be built. Is that going to be done internally? Are you going to outsource that? There's obviously a lot of those individuals you're talking about. When I say individuals, I mean Aave, Compound, Euler. Some of them are already looking at institutional DeFi. How are you planning on getting ecosystem actors? I know you did speak about getting other, contributors in the DeFi ecosystem to help out, but if we could zoom out, what role do you see ecosystem actors within the MakerDAO community and outside the MakerDAO community helping your cluster become that top-notch MetaDAO, if possible?
Yeah. So we'll be heavily using ecosystem actors. Our team is more meant to be like an administrative team where we kind of just take all these different ecosystem actors and other actors and pooling it all together and dealing with the branding and integration and all, basically gluing everything together. Our internal team itself will be small and lean, and we will be contracting ecosystem actors. We need oracles and risk and UI developers, all this kind of stuff. So we'll be working out deals primarily with ecosystem actors or potentially other MetaDAOs.
The role that would there be a bidding process, you think, in the future? I mean, I know it's pretty early, and I would imagine early on, if you need a front end, we have a great set of individuals in the Dux core unit team. Not trying to to pick them as the best of the best, but is there a bidding in your mind, in your vision? Do you see like a bidding process for ecosystem actors?
Yeah, so we're talking to various parties now, working out what exactly that looks like, but we're still early phases, so I can't really concretely say what we're going to do at this stage.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for the answers.
Thanks, Frank. There's some really good questions in there. Any more with Sam while he's on the mic? And if not, we'll move on to Viridian Cluster, which David's going to walk us through.
Yeah, so I guess I have a quick question. Is Crimson Creator Cluster intending to be its own standalone MetaDAO, or do you all intend to join with other creator clusters that haven't been proposed yet?
Standalone MetaDAO.
Right on. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, David, do you want to take us away with the Viridian team then? Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, sure thing. Give me just a second here. I think I lost my annotate button. And there we go. All right, yeah, so the next segment in our discussion section is a focus on the Viridian cluster, which is a protector cluster. And so we have a few people representing here today. I believe Alan Peterson is going to start us off with the overview, but we also have Rajiv here, and we also have, who else was it that we have here? I mean, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So yeah, Alan, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, sure. We have, of course, Rajiv and Sebastian here, who are sort of the key parties in it right now. I can start with the overview, just the frame, really just setting out what has already somewhat been presented in the introduction on the forum. I have a presentation. I think we did a presentation. Can you make it such that I can share anything, or can't I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me just a second. Let me grant you the permissions. You should be set.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I hope people can see the slide now.
Yeah, I could see it well on my screen, so I imagine others as well.
Cool. Good. So I'll just start with these slides, and then Rajiv and Sebastian will join up as we go along. And I'll be very brief here because it's written, of course, already in the introduction. But yeah, it's very much work in progress, and as we write here, a lot of work in progress, because there's a lot to set up to start get going with it. This cluster, what we would like to try and achieve, what we've discussed here is primarily to help secure the stability of DAI, and of course see the asset side of make or grow in the RWA side. But we have two cunning smaller targets, which is sort of subsidiary to the main target of stable DAI and make or asset growth, which is to try and see if we can use what we have here of asset power to help connect DeFi, CeFi, TradFi in a better way than perhaps it's done today, or at least progress it further down the road of where it's going right now. And then, of course, see if we can use some of these asset power that we have here to help do something about climate change. That I think we've stated as well. The first part, I'll just go through these sort of, we've put it up as semi-equations here. The stable DAI and yield, in our view, we think if you've got a great cluster tree gene, we make sure we get hold of high quality arranges, where of course, Monetarz hopes to be one of them, expand our asset universe and act as a proper partner to them, a long-term partners as those that we're setting up today. We think we have a great platform to build stable DAI returns and give stability in the asset base and yield. there's this important subject to Maker stability risk policy, because of course Maker needs to have some frames for how a MetaDAO can invest its or invest or allocate its capital, and I know that work is ongoing right now, and that'll direct a lot of the work on where to go here. But just to be clear, we, at least here with from the Monetalis side, what we're trying hard to do is to build a asset class variety that, you know, we've as you know, we've had this fixation on horses. So here are the four horses that we've put in play so far, put up to the Maker community to look at. And you can sort of start seeing the stack of capital that we have here. We have a base of ETF and bond investment mandates, which is sort of the Clydesdale. Then we had a over-collateralized direct lending, which was quite secure as well. And on top of it, we have this senior secured lending facility in UK and Europe, and US RMBS issuance in the US, which sort of is the top of that, where there's more return, but a little bit less liquid than you would see in the other end, and with more market value variability potentially. But that's trying to build that asset class variety that hopefully the guys sitting in this particular cluster, Rajiv and Sebastian, can use to build appropriate ALM strategies. We'll come up with more things, and there'll be more ranges that'll come up with more things, but the part is we're trying to develop a asset class variety. The next part is, you know, it's a subsidiary priority, but, you know, it is a priority. How do we help arrest climate change? And we think there's a lot of work still to be done in designing the right standards that the community can handle, can think to be, you know, true ESG or true green or true clean money. So we want to work more on that. And then we also believe that there's a chance of us actually accelerating the development of climate asset or climate change proper assets by allocating capital towards that side of it. We think there's, in terms of ultimate investors in the world, there's plenty out there who's very happy to take on green assets or climate change assets, but somebody needs to help the build phase, and we think we're well positioned to actually do that in this particular cluster and have the knowledge there, and then of course grow the investor base by putting it out to more people to be able to invest in. So, and just to show how does that sort of fit into what's already being done, well, actually the two of the horses, the Arrow and Brentwood, are actually both what we would call clean money aligned investments. We are working with them to make sure that the lending that they're putting out has greenhouse gas emission decreases in them. So they are actually quite well aligned and can be built on to do more in that area. And then on the standard side, we're at least Monetalis have signed up to these things, and we're going through them to try and operate or to build what could be an appropriate standard for the Viridian cluster to work on. Connect C DeFi TradFi. This is an important part because that's the one that allows really a lot of the great things that happens in the token world or in the crypto world. How do we get that out and get that used in the real world? And how do we get the great asset that exists in the real world into the token world? Those are a serious challenge, and something that we need to spend a lot of time and energy on getting solved. We believe a lot of it has to do with regulatory engagement, as in figuring out what should be the rules. Switzerland is a little bit ahead of everybody. EU is getting there. The US is challenging, I would say. And then figuring out what is the right way to put things together from a technical and legal side, and then start helping using the asset power we have with Maker, or in this particular cluster, or in the MetaDAO, how to start increasing flows in that system between DeFi, CeFi, TradFi, such that we start seeing more liquidity. This is very in its infancy, but we are starting to discuss and have a lot of detailed discussions with various parties, from regulated token markets to the tokenizers to the what's it called, custodians, marketplaces, all the participants that really are in that full chain of taking real world assets, turning them into tokens, and how do we then get token ownership and control models into not just CeFi, but all the way into DeFi, and are working quite hard on trying to get all this system to work, because we think this is a key part of solving it. Because this is sort of the key thing here. I think, and I think everybody here hopefully can agree, that is when you do all these things, they work together to maximize the results of the Viridian cluster. As in, there is an exponential piece to it. If we start when we use the green case, we get more traction with working with high-end partners. When we start using more of the tokens, we can start getting more liquidity into some of these assets, and that allows us to take and develop more yields and makes it more stable. So all these things sort of work together. We can go more into that at a later stage. We have a very pragmatic view on regulation and DAO. We're firmly a true DAO. It's required to be a part of a MetaDAO, of course. And we're keeping operations open and transparent. I think that's a key part of being a DAO, and it's also a key, let's call it, mechanism to work with regulators to get them comfortable with us. To say we are a DAO, but we are open, we are transparent, you can see what we're doing. If you have regulations for DAOs, we're happy to look at them. We'll try and comply with them. We'll try and do all the things we can. And generally, I think the point 5 is sort of the big point for working, is to stay out of trouble, as in making sure that there are no counterparties that we work with who have any reason to say there's something wrong with what they're doing, to stay open, transparent, and be quite honest. I will leave that was sort of the piece that's going on right now. Or has been going on, but right now I think Rajiv can take over and talk a lot more about what's going on really in terms of building this up.
Thanks, Alan. And yeah, maybe if we can go to the next slide. So we really are at the beginning of coming together as a cluster. So a lot of our time is actually spent on understanding and defining the vision. There's a lot of work that's going to happen in the how to get there. But as a cluster, I mean, we're all existing community members. There are just a few of us. It's Alan, Alessio, Seb, and myself. What sort of, I think, is the common factor is we're all passionate builders and building the bridge between DeFi and TradFi. And we've all had experiences and lessons learned from our early projects and early experiments, and all keen to just carry on that journey and trailblaze a path as this landscape evolves. Not by design, we're all Europe location centric with strong networks in local markets, and we plan to tap into those as we build out the cluster. And priority number 1 really is all about that. It's building a strong team. We're very conscious of the magnitude of the challenge ahead of us, and we need the right talent to be working with us in order to succeed. So that we are focused on identifying and attracting to work with us from the market, and both TradFi and crypto sectors, legal, risk, and credit professionals who share our passion to go on this journey, build bridges, and who share our values. I'm happy to say we've already identified a legal professional who will be working with us. We've sort of identified how we will engage with them, which is a challenge, always a challenge with a DAO, and especially more so as a MetaDAO that's not yet in operation. but we've worked through that, and we'll be introducing that person to the community shortly. In terms of just some of the values, and like we've sort of got a list here, which I think is on the next slide. I'm not going to read through all of this, but Alan talked to it. I guess the key messages are: we're passionate about the building. Like it's something we've all started. We're very conscious. It's just the beginning of the journey. We're in a very fast evolving landscape from a regulatory perspective, from a landscape perspective, from a legal perspective, and actually even from the perspective of players who are in the DeFi landscape. And you've probably seen lots more institutional experiments. Yesterday, there was the news of JP Morgan working with a regulator, MAS from Singapore, working with protocols such as Aave, Uniswap, Polygon, conducting the first DeFi trade. In all our engagements with market players, we're seeing, and certainly over the last year, I've just seen this increasing interest to explore DeFi and to understand how institutions can do that. And right now, I think that they're sort of going through the education phase, they're building out their teams, but we see a huge opportunity to help some of these institutions down that path. It's very clear. Banks are becoming more comfortable with public blockchain infra, and sort of it's part of our desire to act in a very transparent and responsible way, to be part of these discussions with these big institutions, with the regulators, and sort of be a strong voice in the legal landscape as that evolves. That's pretty much it from us. As I said, we really are at the beginning of the journey. We have so much to define and work through, and we'll obviously be sharing that in a very transparent way as we solidify our plans.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Alan, for sharing. I'm going to go back to my slides. I did add some questions while you guys were presenting that I saw in the chat. And we can go through them kind of one by one, and if we could take 2 to 3 minutes to try to answer each one, I think that would be a good flow. So let me go ahead and share. All right. So let me hit my annotate little tool so I could do circles. And so, yeah, let's kind of go from top left down. Yeah, so Frank, before the call, had asked, how is your cluster thinking about the possibility of going risk on and partnering with arrangers that go after riskier opportunities? He cited the examples of the junk bond market or the corporate bond market. What is your, approach on this? And I guess going riskier than going the riskier side. And Frank, feel free to jump in.
I think if there is the capital to do it, to bag it up, sure, of course. I mean, the idea is to try to generate max yield, right? I think we should, that would be good. But I think a lot of it is going to be dictated by that hard frame that's going to come from Maker, that we're sort of, a little bit waiting for how that's going to be structured. If it's, you can, here's what you can do, then and it allows us to do risk on things, and allows Rajiv and the team to start finding people who are much better at that than I am. I would imagine if the numbers stack up, that it's worthwhile taking the risk, then sure, I would say. But so at this moment, there isn't really, at this moment, everything that's being put in is very, very secure and stable, and that's sort of been the direction of travel for the time being. But as I said, as long as capital comes in and we understand the clear frame from Maker to MetaDAO, yeah.
Yeah, and my understanding is that as the cluster is introduced, it's basically tracking all of the monetalisms, basically all the listed MIPs in the written forum post, like Clydesdale, Appaloosa, and the other horse names. But yeah, okay, cool. Rajiv, I'd love to hear you expand.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly where the initial focus is, right? Like we're coming into this with a lot of things to already look at. Seb can talk more to the ALM guidelines that they're coming up with from strategic finance. But I think we're not thinking of risk on at the moment, Frank.
So I guess this question is pretty related. Well, actually, I guess you answered it, right? Do you see any opportunities in the short to medium term with corporates? I assume since you guys are not trying to go risk on, that's a no.
Yeah, I think this is, so it would, so there's a number of things going on here. As in, if there were capital, I actually think there is opportunities here. I definitely do. But at this moment, I don't know if Maker would be ready for it. And what I definitely know is that the MIP process and the decision making and execution process, it is so slow. I mean, and I understand why it's slow. Don't get me wrong, but it's so slow that timing of these types of things would be really, really hard to do. You know. So I think I see opportunities, but I'm just not sure they would be good for Maker at the current moment as for where things are.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alan. And then also related question, I'm just gonna get through all the Frank questions. How do you plan on hedging risk for the RMBS, the residential mortgage-backed securities, when exposed via arrangers like I believe Arrow was the one that was doing
Redwood?
Yeah, actually I'm thinking of Redwood, they're the specialists for the RMBS, right? So how do you plan to hedge their risks, for example?
I'm not quite what, so
maybe I think I kind of understand the question, but my understanding that the answer is it's hedged by the other projects that you guys are allowing or tracking Maker's exposure to, right? Like it's not just Redwood. Redwood is just one part of what the cluster is really like overseeing, because it's also Clydesdale, it's also Appaloosa, and so
sure.
The aggregate, like all of these approved deals work out to be your basically risk adjusted portfolio. So yeah. That's, I would say, how you're hedging the risk, but I don't know, Frank, feel free to come on and state the question.
Yeah, Alan, it's more related to prepayment risk, right? As interest rates eventually, hopefully, as an American, I hope they'll go down eventually, right? So mortgages become more attractive. And obviously in the last 24 hours, even the Fed chairman, Jay Powell, said that the mortgage market right now is, not the most attractive, right? With the spread between the 30-year and 30-year jumbo mortgage rate. So I was just wondering how, if we start buying RMBS via I already forgot the name of it. Yeah, Redwood. Yes. And interest rates do come down in say at the end of 2023, 2024. How do you hedge yourself against that? Being that, if these bonds get called back, right, I would imagine the yield will come down and the bond price will go up. You can correct me if I'm wrong there too.
Yeah, so if they start repaying their mortgages, which they should, by the way, I mean, if interest rate comes down, they definitely should start, refinancing their mortgages. That would mean that we get repaid earlier. And because we're buying this bond below par, it's going to be below 100, we should get a little bit more yield, okay? So it's annoying that we then need to go out and reinvest it. There's sort of the reinvestment risk. It's if you were a pension fund, we would be really annoyed by all these repayments, because then we need to go out and find other opportunities to deliver yield. But for us at the current moment, the fact that the cash flows gets more compressed, that should be fine. We should see no losses on this. It's just what we would get is much quicker cash flow back. And we should actually see a total yield increase on that, because we've purchased the bond below par. but it will mean that we need to go out and find investment opportunities faster. So that should be the dynamics in respect of the interest rate start going down. Now, in terms of losses, I guess there's also a risk there if people start having losses. But there, of course, this is the AAA, first cash flow position. So we should essentially be quite well covered for making sure that if people start defaulting, we should be getting all our capital back, because there is a huge portion of capital in front of us. That's, yeah.
Got it. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Hey, Alan, quick question. What are your thoughts on if prepayments come in significantly slower, given that we're in a rising rate environment and these things have a longer duration than expected?
I don't think so. I don't think they can come in too much slower. The repayment, I mean, that's when people start defaulting, right? And there should actually be protections in there, because basically, because it's first cash flow. So I think we should not be too exposed to that piece of the risk, as far as I understand in there. We should be quite well protected from that side because of the position we've taken. But look, honestly, that's my instinct right now and how I understood it. But I'll happily get a authorized opinion as well from the guys from Redwood, if you want to. I'll note that down. But I from my understanding and from how I analyzed it last time, it shouldn't be an exposure that we really see.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I used to work in the residential structured finance desk at JP Morgan, so I know the SEM shelf well. So I definitely would be curious to take a look at which piece you're actually buying and how it's structured.
Okay, this sounds great. Of course.
All right, let me direct our attention to a few of the questions I've seen in chat. So one of them, I want the square, not the circle. So in the current environment, why not just go all in on treasuries and earn over 4% with minimal risk? Why all of this sort of, why all of these different deals?
Maybe I can take this one.
Please.
And already that's up to the community, I would say, and I try to formalize that a little bit the last few months. So we could only invest in T-bills which is in your case MIP65/IB01, which is very short duration, no risk, effect 4%, even more than 4% now that the expectations are more hawkish. But the problem is, a possible problem is that at some point we have to give part of this cash flow to the DAI holders by increasing the DSR. So Coinbase already increased their rewards to 1.5%. We see an outflow from USDC that most likely go to the TradFi investing in money market funds, because obviously when you can get 4% risk-free, you don't keep USDC or DAI. At some point you make the arbitrage. So we will have to give something. I don't know how much we will have to give in DeFi. In TradFi, it's a bit different because you don't have to give that much because there is some stickiness and people are, well, they like to just get a bank account and it's easy. But in DeFi, we know that people are, let's put it that way, smarter and more faster to react. So it's unclear what we will have to give. My view is that we will have to give most of the risk-free rate. And so that means that your spread between the risk-free rate and what we get will be super small. If we earn the risk-free rate and we give the risk-free rate to the holders, we will earn nothing and we have to pay expenses. So that's not a good situation. So we should take a bit more risk to earn more than 4% currently. Let's say 5%, let's say 6%. And so we could sustain our development at MakerDAO as a whole and still generate profit to burn some Maker token. That's it. If I can expand if needed. So we need to lay out the rails to be able to do it in 1 year, because as Alan said, MakerDAO is something that moves slow. And so currently only investing in T-bills is perfect. In 6 months, 1 year, I'm not sure. So we need to have the opportunities to do something else later on. And for the size of those opportunities, usually those are opportunities with big players. So they are not interested in doing a 5 million deal here or here. So that's why there is some size, but we should try to limit the size of those experiments as much as possibly can.
Yeah, thank you, Seb. I guess the next question I saw in chat was posed by, I believe, David Kret. Yeah, so all of these MIPs are in Maker Core. So how do you envision Vault adoption taking place from a technical perspective? Do you plan to run your own on-chain lending engine, or is it some other approach?
So I'm not entirely sure how. I honestly don't know how this Vault. I understand the Vault adoption will take place, and that's the idea how it should work. What the technical features or how it happens, I don't personally know at all. Rajiv, maybe you.
No, as we said, we're in very early stages of this journey. There is a lot to be defined. I think the next months are going to be key as part of, I guess, our analysis and planning process. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I guess, David, if you want to add any, feel free to hop on the mic, add any details. All right, cool. So another interesting question was about the true DAO characterization found in the proposal. So as well as the understandable and logical preference here to engage fully with regulators, to what extent can you have both, being a true DAO and like an entity that, engages with regulators? What happens if and when MetaDAO token holders balk at a regulator's demand or requirement and vote accordingly? Will the MetaDAO's token holders get an essential veto over the Viridian strategy / proposed plan of action?
I guess the first part I can say something about the fact that you're trying to be a true DAO and say that here's an innovative new way of structuring work and organization and decision making. There is a good number of regulators in Europe who accept that as saying, okay, that's an interesting experiment, and we're going to let you go down that path. Just don't break anything. But please try this out, and we'll let you know when regulation starts tidying in and saying, you can stay with this or you can't, or so on. So it makes sense as long as you're being as open as possible. That has definitely worked in a number of countries in Europe. Nobody's saying, okay, this is interesting, as long as you're keeping us informed and we understand what's going on. So that can persist. Now you can have both, basically. You are engaging with the regulator as well as saying that you are truly a DAO and trying to distribute decision making as widely as absolutely possible. So that is just happening right now, and definitely regulators are receptive to that. What happens if the token holders balk at regulators' demands and requirements and vote accordingly? Well, I mean so you have to follow the token holders' decision. Obviously, I suppose you can't force anybody to do something that's illegal to a large degree. So I think that could. I don't know what the resolution is, but usually what one would find is that when gets into that point, that the pragmatism and compromise culture and spirit that we somewhat are trying to build here with this hopefully could come to the fore, and we find a way, right? That's how it's always been. You want something, the regulator wants something else. We're trying to find somewhere in between that ultimately works.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually one I've been wondering myself. It's a situation I hope we never find ourselves in. But yeah, I think there is a lot of work happening, especially in Europe, in terms of regulators looking to create frameworks for DAOs, setting up legal structures so DAOs can actually do exactly all the things we're looking to do. But how we manage that conflict, I think it's something we're going to have to, learn our way through and sort of use good, pragmatic, I think, sense to resolve. Again, I hope it's something we don't encounter for a long time.
And just to follow up there, Rajiv or Alan, as far as building those trust anchors, right, where you have RWA, perhaps tokens on chain, and you see institutional DeFi finally willingly wanting to participate, and also the proponents of having everything on chain also get their cake and eat it too, right, where a lot of the RWA is tokenized, is on chain. How are you guys going to work? How is eventually, if you get approved as a MetaDAO, how are you guys going to work? Are you going to hire more individuals to help you with the technical side of things to make sure that perhaps there's a pivot where you are looking to put to work the money that you guys have into on-chain tokenized real world assets? How are you guys thinking about that?
I think that's, I mean, I think the key is to keep the team reasonably small with Rajiv and Sebastian and so on, and then basically hire a lot of these skills from the outside. I think that sort of lightweight MetaDAO is I think everybody's, as I understood, that's where a lot of the MetaDAOs are trying to go to make it a lightweight team. And I mean, no, a heavyweight team, but a small team, I think I would say, yeah. But for sure, there's a lot of technical pieces here. As you tokenize and get things into the tokenized world with RWA, and at that point, yeah, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done. Yeah.
I guess you're going to outsource it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was going to say that I mean, there's so many projects who are looking to tokenize, bring on-chain existing securities under a regulatory compliant framework, who we're already talking to, and certainly as part of the growth team, we've been accompanying them for a long time. In terms of, so I'm hoping that, the industry is going to evolve to bring a lot more things on chain that just natively we can integrate with, and some things are actually really close. In terms of access to resource, technical and specialist skills, I mean, absolutely. These are complex markets. Each market is a market, and you do need access to that specialist skill sets. So clearly, I don't think we can, it doesn't make sense to build all of that up in-house, but we will definitely need to identify and be able to quickly bring on board, almost on a project basis, the right skill sets to help us evaluate each initiative and properly assess it, across a legal perspective, a risk, credit, or whatever it may require. And part of our initial efforts is actually going out, engaging the market, understanding where those skill sets lie, and making even sort of selling them the world of DeFi and assessing their interest to actually work with us on these bridges. So and look, there's a lot of interest out there. So I'm sure we will build up that network. It will take some time.
I guess what you're saying is that if institutional DeFi does take off and you see platforms like ARC, by take off, maybe someone like the Crimson Cluster would be better fit to kind of mimic that and compete with the Aavis of the world, Aavi institutional. We shouldn't expect Viridian Cluster to eventually become a MetaDAO who's going to technically compete against those folks. Is that right? Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't think that's in our core focus right now.
Got it. Thanks, man.
All right, so I was actually curious, you touched on this, Rajiv, but who does risk assessments of real world asset deals nowadays? And is the Viridian Cluster responsible for risk assessment and legal risk assessment of the real world asset deals in its mandate or purview?
That's my understanding. Bear in mind, we're a few weeks in, so we're building out the team who can do this.
So the Viridian, so given the cluster gets adopted by a MetaDAO, whatever the mechanism is, then I think the idea is that the Viridian cluster should hopefully be able to run, standalone, as in be able to do risk assessments, be able to do legal. That's why Rajiv is out finding all these right people and so on. So that then, yeah, those would be counterparties to for instance Monetalis and other ranges that hopefully comes along and have a lot of great stuff to add.
Cool, thanks. Is the cluster intending to be its own MetaDAO, or does it intend to partner with other protector clusters like Spring?
I think own MetaDAO. I think that's so own MetaDAO. But I believe that there's plenty of knowledge sharing and debate between the different MetaDAOs, because if Rajiv and everybody here finds a good way to work together, let's share it with the other, and hopefully vice versa. So there's plenty of knowledge and process and so on sharing. But I think fundamentally the idea would be that the Viridian cluster can come up with one way to support DAI, and Spring Cluster can come up with a different way to support it. The asset management strategies or the investment strategies can be different, right? You can create DAI stability many different ways because it's a big asset world. So there would be one version here, there'd be another version here, and hopefully there'll be many other clusters that has different versions. And that gives actually, the total maker a certain degree of diversification, right? That it has many different types of ways that are supporting it.
Yeah, I'm hoping we're going to see some good collaboration as we start, and as we scale, then each MetaDAO can obviously start defining its own best practices.
Yeah. I guess as this end game reality, comes to existence, I'm trying to wrap my head around the difference between fundamentally a creator MetaDAO and a protector MetaDAO. And so I know that Spring and Viridian are the protector MetaDAOs. They mainly deal with the real world asset deals. They need to build a real world asset portfolio, and they have to do it in sort of a high legitimacy way, a way that honors token holders risk appetites and all of that stuff. Whereas creators are more the I don't know if this is right, but the software development arms, whether it's front ends, whether it's additional features to maker core products. So I'm curious to hear from delegates and really from anybody who has a clearer understanding of the two classes, whether my characterization there is right or not. I'll take that as we all definitely know the answer. We're just not telling you, David.
Yeah.
All right. I'll move on to a different question. That's right. So I guess these were a few that I also saw in the chat. Has anyone considered what happens to the protocol if any one of these horses goes insolvent?
I mean, I guess we've tried to build something that is highly unlikely to ever go insolvent, right? That's the key of it, I think. If something goes insolvent, the question is, has it lost all the money, or is it just not able to pay out as it was planned? If it's losing all the money, well, yeah, that's a problem. So that's also why we're trying to make a good number of pieces. But I will say these are some. It's not quite like in betting where we just hope a few of them comes in as number one. These are all fairly solid horses that are out there that very unlikely to go insolvent or even lose any material element of value, in fact. But I mean, what is you could make the I guess you could have the question is how big a loss, be that from a horse or be that from any portfolio or anything, how big a loss is acceptable and will still make the die to take over and retain its value and so on. I just don't, I have no idea what that number would be.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that is definitely a key question that people keep going back to, like, what is our risk tolerance? How much in reserves do we actually need? And I believe strategic finance has been doing a lot of important work around that question.
Yeah, and just to jump on the question, because there are two parts based on some discussion we have on the chat as well. One is, let's say you invest in the RMBS, which I think is R01 or Redwood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it's a portfolio of loans. So even if 10% of the loan goes insolvent, you might have collateral, but let's forget about it. Just lose 10% of the value of the loan, which is not 100%. And so that's what Alan's saying, but well, how much will we lose if there is a big problem? Because we cannot, on an RMBS, the senior tranche, it's almost impossible, I guess, to lose 100%. That means that the real estate market in the US goes to zero. On the other hand, we are using some legal structures. We are having some counterparty risk. Some people can be fraudulent and all that. And that's more of a key risk or counterparty risk. And that's something we cannot put to zero. And we already face a lot of those risks. We have spoken at length about the regulatory risk of USDC, where a circle can blacklist USDC and we are dead. We have the same issue with wrap Bitcoin. If BitGo stop to provide conversion from wrap Bitcoin to BTC, well, we are kind of, maybe we are no longer dead because we don't have that much. And there is a lot of stuff like that it's very difficult to find solutions. And we can try to diversify, but diversification at some point will not help because there are some risks that are just way too big. Like if the US government puts us on the OFAC list, well, we are dead no matter what we do. So we have to think about all the risk and see which one we can hedge by diversification, by doing things a bit differently, and those that we cannot hedge, and well, we just have to live with those. Because saying that everything will be rugging us, it's not a valuable proposition because the only asset that will never rug us is, and that's not a lot of that. But that's why we want to invest in this as well.
Thank you for that added color, Sebastian. Coming up on about the last 5 minutes of the call. I know I have a couple of more questions here, but I want to make sure that the attendees get answers to the questions they're most interested in. So if anybody has anything really burning that they're curious about, feel free to bring it up now. And as I keep my eye on the chat, I am curious, so will the Viridian cluster have on-chain governance? And basically, if not, how will Maker Core know who to listen to in the event of a dispute?
I think all the MetaDAOs are set up, or I believe they're set up the same, as in there is the MetaDAO token is the voting token, and that's where the governance is. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, right. Well, so I guess what I meant was, will the Viridian, will the MetaDAO that Viridian belongs to have on-chain governance, and how will basically Maker listen to them in the event of a dispute? But yeah, cool, get that. Yeah, all right, cool. Alan, Rajiv, Sebastian, if you guys have any other additional color you want to add before we end it, feel free.
No, thank you for listening to us. And if you've got any questions, you can always post them in there, and then we'll try and answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just say that there's a lot we're working through, a lot to be defined. We're obviously going to go through a huge learning curve, and we'll be very open and transparent as we define things and move forward.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Viridian Cluster, and thank you, Crimson Cluster, for joining us on today's GNR call. And thank you all who submitted questions and participated in the discussion. We appreciate you.